I read around 2 books every single week with a full-time schedule. And no, I'm not a fast reader. In fact, I read pretty slowly. But there are some tips that I implement into my daily life to help me achieve that. And in this video, I'm gonna show you real clips from my real life as proof. So keep on watching. Hi friends, welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to another episode. My name is Caroline. I am a full-time student with a 9-to-5 schedule, but I'm also somebody who loves reading and who loves content creation. My entire personality trait is trying to fit reading into my schedule. So if that's something that sounds right up your alley, and if you're looking for some reading tips to read more in 2025, then give me a like, give me a subscribe, and give me a follow. Today we're talking about some tips that help me read 2 books on average every single week, even with a 9-to-5 and a hectic schedule. So let's get right into the video. The first tip that I have, or the thing that I follow religiously every single day, is to try to make reading as convenient as possible. That means having a book with me every single where I go. My outfit is not complete without a book. I always bring a book with me no matter what. You never know if you're gonna have a 5-minute, 10-minute break in between your commute, in between your lunch breaks, in between your meetings. And that time, instead of scrolling on your phone, you can just whip out a book or whip out your e-reader and read for 5 to 10 minutes. That still counts, by the way, as a reader. So that's something that I've worked on to replace scrolling on my phone and using my phone in general in my breaks to reading, and really enjoy reading, especially during break times, because sometimes breaks are not very long. They're usually like 5 to 10, 15 minutes max. They're like in a weird spot between not too long but not too short. So if I scroll on my phone for like 5 minutes, that's gonna be a rather short length of time to scroll my phone. So I usually read, and I usually whip out my e-reader, and that just makes things a lot easier. Also, if I don't have a physical copy of my book with me, I always have my e-reader with me. This is my Boox Go Color 7. I love this thing to the day I die. This thing is just so convenient, and it's such worth the investment. I chose this one over the Kindle because I don't like Amazon and Kindle, they have this user rights updated where even if you buy the book on Kindle and you pay for it with your own money, it does not necessarily belong to you fully, because you cannot transfer the books from Kindle to other devices like other tablets or laptops. So it stays in your Kindle. Even with the Kindle Color Soft that's out like recently, it's like $300 plus. This thing, the Boox Go Color, I got their newest version last year at around like $250. That's like $50 off. And also, if you don't like a Boox, then you could go with like a Kobo Libra. I think that's pretty popular, but I go for a Boox because I just feel like it speaks to me, and also reading like manga and pictures on this thing is very satisfying. So that's the first thing. Make reading very convenient for you so that you don't have to overthink. So that's something to be very intentional about. Okay, I just wanted to show you my outfit today. I have a very basic white tee on with jeans and a pair of Nikes, and most importantly, I have my book with me. I am reading Blood of a Bright Haven by Makw. I am like a bit over halfway through. I think I could finish this book today. Point being, always have a book with you. Last week I finished Onyx Storm, and because I didn't have a physical copy of Onyx Storm, I brought my e-reader with me and make this accessory a part of your outfit. The next thing that I have is kind of a thing that I found works very well for me, is that if you're somebody who works under pressure very well, or if you're like just somebody who likes to have a bit of a tension, a bit of a deadline, then I would say go to your local library and borrow books from there instead of buying books with your own money in the bookstores. And I know that's a very popular tip in terms of reading, but it's a different reason for me why I borrow books from my library. Okay, it's free, obviously, financial incentive, but also it has a due date, it has a deadline. So that kind of motivates and pushes me to read the books and actively like read. I think of reading every single hour of the day because of that sole reason, because I'm afraid that I won't be able to finish that deadline on time. I am a perfectionist. I am somebody who works under pressure very well, and also I like to complete stuff. I like to tick off stuff. I like to complete, chase a deadline, chase a due date. So that tip works very well for me for that reason. Whenever I go to the library, I feel very inspired, but that's not necessarily the main reason why I borrow books from the library. It's that I feel like I need to read that book, and I have to read that book, or else I'm gonna miss out, because there's like 98 people in the queue waiting for me to read that book. Having this kind of like invisible pressure on you all the time, and I just like, that works very well for me. Okay, I want to give you a bit of a library haul. I do have to whisper because I'm in the library, but this is my library haul for today. Let me put it down for a second. First, I saw Anne of Green Gables, and I've been hearing a lot about this book, and I heard that this is a very well-beloved series. It also looks very interesting and beautiful with the cover, and my libraries have physical copies of all of the books in the series, so I'm like, why not? And then this one caught my eyes because it is written by a Japanese author, and there are 2 parts to the story. This is a true novel by Mine Mizumura. Hopefully I'm pronouncing her name correctly. And this is apparently being compared to The Wuthering Heights by one of the Bronte sisters, so I'm like very intrigued. It is very thick. Since completing Deep End on such a high hope, should I try another romance? I saw Say You'll Remember Me by Abby Jimenez, and this is also my first Abby Jimenez book. I should get this one, but the true novel by the Japanese author, that's a maybe, because I'm not sure if I want to torture myself to another pretty heavy book. Okay, I think I'm gonna pick out these 2. Those are my library haul. The next tip that I have is try to have a set hour in the day where you dedicate solely to reading. Whether that be in the morning before work, you wake up a bit earlier to read, to do your morning skincare, to do your morning routine, to make breakfast, that works as well. Or in between your lunch breaks, you have an hour, or you can be commuting to your workplace and you have like an hour and a half, 2 hours. But for me, it's reading before bed. This is a habit that I've built for myself because prior to like reading like dedicatedly and as a full-time thing, I used to have very big issues with sleeping and falling asleep. This might be my fault because I overthink a lot, and at night is where my brain is the most active. It's a very weird trait that I have manifested. Even as a small child, I found that my body cannot relax. But since implementing reading into my night routine and carving out this 1 hour and a half before bed to solely reading, that means no phone, no distraction, no text, no messages, no assignments, no to-dos, nothing on my mind except reading. I found that it worked very well and helps calms me down, like really calm me down to the point that I could actually sleep now, which is like, thank God, because what reading does is that it immerses you in this world, especially if you couple it with like intentional relaxation. Whenever I read, I have to remind myself to like take a deep breath in and then fully relax. It is a way of escapism for me, a form of escapism for me, and it works really well. At first, when I was reading, I didn't even intentionally read because I want to relax or because I want to fall asleep. It comes as a surprise to me. So don't go into reading thinking that, oh, I have to read because of this goal, or I have to read because I want to fall asleep. Don't go into reading with a goal. I feel like reading should be treated as something that's purely enjoyment and purely joy, because that's exactly what reading does. But it really helps to have that in mind as a benefit or a motivation to read more if you're somebody who's still like on the edge in terms of whether I should read more, whether I should dedicate more time to reading. I think it's worth it. I think it's that deep on this corner of the internet, and I think it's gonna help you more than you think. Another benefit of working a full-time job and having another life out of reading is that it's very hard for you to fall into a reading slump because you have other things to do. You're forced in a sense to get up and do other things and not be in a slump. We have a kind of a limit in terms of how much we can read, and that also limit the risk of falling into a slump. Fingers crossed I haven't fallen into a slump since I got back into reading, and let's not do that now after finishing this video. That's a very long rant in terms of time blocking for reading. But the next thing that I have is start documenting and keeping notes and a book journal, if you will, of every book that you read, but also a summary of all of those books. Another thing that could maybe prevent people from reading more is they found that reading doesn't serve them any value or doesn't have any value to their life, which is totally false. I think even if you read a romance book or something that's not as serious or not as big as like classic books or high fantasy, they can still add value to your life. And I think one way to really see and analyze and reflect on your books and the effects that the topics have on you mentally and physically and emotionally is to keep a book journal. This is something that I'm still working on, to be honest, because I don't have a habit of writing down books. I think my way of documenting books is doing content creation and talking about books on my TikTok and my YouTube. That works very well with me because it helps me connect themes, helps me connect books based on their similarities on the topics that they cover, so that I could really do a book recommendation recommendation video for you guys, for example, or just like grouping books in terms of categories to make it easier for me to talk about books, I try to keep a book journal or at least jot down some notes. Because, for example, if there's a quote that I really like or a section or a passage that struck me, I feel like it's worth writing down, and your book journal will do that. I also have my own personal journal where I write down every single book that I read in 2025 along with their ratings, and that's also another very great form of bookkeeping. The reason why I added this tip is because writing down what you read and your books and how they made you feel physically on paper is a way to reflect back, just like how people keep their own journal, their daily journal, their junk journal. But also whenever you look back your book journal, I found so much motivation and inspiration to keep reading, especially if you create like very cute spreads and very aesthetic spreads on your journal. Whenever you look back and you look at that and you feel like, oh, that's something that I did and it looks great, you're motivated to read more, to create more spreads, to fill up that journal. And also because I post content on YouTube and on TikTok surrounding reading and books recommendations, I also take that as a motivation and an obligation in the best way possible to read more, so that I have more stuff, more topics, more discussions to talk with people about. So if that's something that works for you, you don't have to start a TikTok account to do so. I think Goodreads and Fable and just other book tracking platforms works well as well. You can create a following on there, or at least have a goal for yourself where once a week you're gonna post a review of one of the books you read that week. And I think that's a great way to make sure that you have a record, first of all, to see how far you've come from a non-reader to now somebody who reads constantly. Things like that make you feel better about yourself, in my opinion, because it's a goal. Something about a goal is that if we set a goal, we want to accomplish it, and having a physical record where you can look and see, okay, this is my progress, or this is where I'm lacking, I could improve on that aspect of reading, for example. The last tip in this video that I'm gonna cover is follow people who inspire you, or follow people who read. So whenever you scroll on social media, if you scroll on social media, you're gonna be surrounded by people who talk about book recommendation, talking about their favorite books of the year. Once again, inspiration is key, especially if you're starting out and you're getting back into reading. Going to the library also adds some inspiration to your life. Keeping a book journal also inspires you to keep reading, at least for me. And also follow people on your social media, curating your feed in a way that whenever you scroll, it's gonna bring up books for you. Always constantly exposes you to reading. I feel like seeing other people read makes you rethink what reading really entails, because sometimes when people look at reading, they are either intimidated because it's scary or they're overwhelmed. Obviously, following people on social media can be a double-edged sword. On one hand, you can feel very inspired and you can add like so many recommendations into your bookshelves. On the other hand, you can also feel overwhelmed, which is exactly what I felt when I first started out. But it's okay. It's okay. It's also okay to try their recommendations and then go from there. The first series that I started out with was A Court of Thorn and Roses. The first 3 books I think was beautifully done. And then the 4th book onward, I was a bit bored, to be honest. I think that entire series is a bit long in my opinion. So I DNF'd that. I'm not gonna continue reading. I got to the 5th book and the final book, but then I stopped. I was like, this is enough. I'm bored. I'm not gonna read anymore. So remember that when you take recommendations from people on TikTok or on YouTube, you don't have to finish the book if you don't like it. It's not like you owe them something that you have to finish it. You can see a book, you can become intrigued of the book, you can pick it up, you can start it, you can read it, but then if halfway through or even 70% through, you don't feel like reading that book for some reason, you can drop it. We can make another entire episode about this, but it's not the point of reading is to just finish a book and complete a book. The point of reading is to obviously build up a habit of reading, but also reflecting and being able to pick out themes from the books that you read to connect them into this bigger picture of the things that you learn about life. Even if a book is fiction, it's always set in life, in some sense of whatever life or whatever society you're envisioning. There's at least a bit of truth in there, and that's my goal now, to pick books intentionally complex and a mirror image, if possible, of society in today's day and age, so that I could pick out themes that's very similar but also different. Then I can compare and contrast them and pick out what's wrong in one scenario and what's right in the other scenario. So genres like dystopian, literary fiction, historical fiction works very well for me, and classics even. But sometimes I just want to have fun, and romance books and thrillers and mysteries and even horror horror, even though I haven't dabbled my feet into horror that much. But the point being is that don't read a book just to finish a book. Read a book so that you either feel something or you can pick out a theme. If you're new to reading or recently got back into reading but don't know where to start, I have some book recommendations for you to help you get started. In terms of fantasy, I have 2 recommendations. Anything by Makw is very good to start off with. This is Blood Over Brighthaven. This is the one that I just finished last night. It's a very easy read. This is more of a dystopian fantasy, but I still recommend it. The magic system is very interesting and very central to the plot, which adds another layer of complexity and nuances. I started off not liking the female protagonist as much, but she grew on me and she definitely left an impact in my heart at the end of the story. The other recommendation by Makw is sort of Kaigen. I'm gonna put it up on the screen somewhere. It raises a lot of questions about motherhood, but also the roles of the woman in the household. The setting is set in a village where there are several noble and prestigious houses who can wield ice, and basically they have magic, and it talks also a lot about the propaganda of the country that they're in, and also how the women are supposed to be obedient and submissive to their husbands. What if war comes and the female protagonist is the only person who knows the enemies and how to attack them and defeat them? If you're thinking of getting into classics, I have a couple of classic recommendations for you. The first one, my absolute favorite, is Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. I know this is a classic, and it is a classic for a reason. I would say a pretty dense book. In terms of level of difficulty, this one is higher compared to Blood Over Brighthaven and sort of Kaigen. I really enjoy the family, the society, the gossip, the drama, and the love affairs, the love relationship of the characters. I was so much attached to them, especially Elizabeth and her relationship with Mr. Darcy. It also raises a lot of important questions about etiquette, manners. Women in this society, they're also expected to be very submissive and obedient to their father and their husband, and marriage is the only thing that women in the society care about, and we can see that reflected in the mother of the story. And so I love this book, highly recommend. I had such a good time and I was just like cracking up, giddy, and I just love the characters. If you're thinking of starting with a dystopian book, then I would recommend, once again, a classic, 1984. I just finished this book a couple of days ago, and this book I also highlighted a bunch in this book, and I feel like this is dripping knowledge, dripping gold in terms of the propaganda, in terms of the big government, in terms of how an authoritarian society and government controls its citizen, of being so powerful that they allow 2 contradictory ideas to exist in the same world. And then another very fun and breezy read, but talks a lot about mundane and important topics in society. This is Greater and Voden. This is the first book that I read that has such a good representation of LGBTQ plus community and queerness in general. We follow 2 siblings in the story, Greater and Voden. Greater, she is a PhD student. She doesn't have a job. She's also grappling with the financial hardships in her life, but also her love life as well, because she usually is drawn to people who are not good for her and people who often look down upon her and her research and her beliefs. On the other hand, Voden, he is having a situationship with his ex-boyfriend. There is tropes of miscommunication and second chance romance. I've grown to really appreciate their sibling relationship, and Voden reminds me a lot about my brother, and reading this is just such a beautiful and wholesome and delightful slice of life. So yeah, those are the books that I think would be very easy to read and are great for beginners, no matter if you're like new beginners or you're just starting and getting back into reading. So my last piece of advice is just start reading. It doesn't have to be like 100 pages a day. It can be like 1 page a day, 1 chapter a day, and then by reading more and reading more frequently, you're also gonna build up momentum, getting more comfortable with reading and easier for you to immerse in the world, and that's when you're gonna read faster. Go in blind and don't expect anything. Those are my pieces of advice in terms of how to read more, especially with a full-time schedule and a full-time job with a very hectic and very busy schedule. Just know that even if you have a 9-to-5 job, a very busy schedule, if you're a mom of 3 or you have lots of things on your schedule, you can still read. Remember to start small and just take it slow. I hope you enjoy and found these tips helpful. If you do, then please give me a like, give me a subscribe if you feel like it. I post reading vlogs, but also I'm doing a rebrand to make sure that people like myself with a full-time job whose passion is also to read can read more and can find tips to implement reading into their daily life. None of these tips are revolutionary, but they've changed how I perceive reading, but also how I read on a day-to-day basis. If you even try once of the tips, I promise promise that you're gonna see a huge difference in your reading schedule, reading goals, reading habits, but also just reading in general. If you've watched all the way through up to this point, comment down below what book you're reading and let's have a discussion, and also know what habit or what tip you're excited to try next. Thank you for listening once again. Thank you so much for tuning in every single week, and I'll see you next week with another episode, and until then, happy reading!